recording this session. So thank you all you made it. I know we had some complications this morning, so I super appreciate everybody's patience, flexibility, and understanding as we get started here today. Good morning and welcome to Cradle-to-Career's Community Engagement and Data and Tools Advisory Board's meeting. My name is Mary Kate Cruz-Jones. I might be an unfamiliar face to some of you. I just started with the office in March. But I'm very happy to be here and lead this meeting with y'all today. My official title is Chief of Strategic Initiatives and Partnerships here at Cradle-to-Career. As a reminder, today's meeting will be run according to the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act as required by law. And we plan to end today's meeting around 11:30 today. So I apologize, I just bit into 10 of those minutes. We have quite a bit to do. So if we can get started, I also just have one little minor thing to do as we'd like to share our slide deck with you. So give me,
Mary Kate, I'm happy to call the roll if you need a moment to sort the logistics on that. Would that be helpful to you?
That would be very helpful. Thank you.
All right, we're going to jump into this. Thank you for your flexibility. So I'm going to start by doing the roll call for the Data and Tools Advisory Board. And if you don't mind just unmuting and saying that you're present, this is in alphabetical order by last name. So Alex Adams. Okay, Marshall Anthony Jr. Jason Borgen.
Present.
Lisa Chavez.
Present.
Tamika Connor.
Present.
Reagan Faust.
Present.
Kathy Huang. Heather Huff.
Present.
Jake Jackson.
Here.
Amber Jacoba.
Here.
Brendan Livingston.
Present.
Jennifer Orlick.
Present.
Laura Owen.
Present.
Vikash Reddy.
Present.
Liberty Van Natten.
Present.
Davis Bowe.
Present.
All right, and now we'll go on to the Community Engagement Board. Anna Alvarado.
Present.
Lauren Asher.
Present.
Patricia Chavez. Michelle Cheng. Meredith Curry.
Present.
Tanisha James.
Present.
Nancy Jedidas.
Present.
Arcadia Largo.
Present.
Paige Leverin.
Present.
Marcos Montez.
Present.
Chris Mellon.
Present.
Jackie Navarez.
Present.
Lisa Rodriguez.
Present.
Sarah Sandhu. And Spede Viveris Walton. Okay, we have a quorum of both of our boards present. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Mary Kate.
Perfect. And just to correct the record, I do see that Kathy is here. Unfortunately, she just wasn't in as a panelist. So I just would like to correct that. As Marianne mentioned, we do have a quorum. So we will begin today's meeting at 10:13 a.m. Before we really dig in, I'd just like to introduce Judy Chan. She's our new Deputy Director of Digital Services. So I'd like to give her a moment to introduce herself. Thanks, Judy.
Thank you, Mary Kate. Hello and good morning, everyone. My name is Judy Chan, and I've taken on the new role as Deputy Director of Digital Services at Cradle-to-Career. I will be responsible for developing a strategy for the alignment and scaling up of student and practitioner-facing tools, as well as gathering input from the community to inform the improvement of these tools. I have a number of years of experience from the New York City Department of Education, where I focused on data analytics. I'm very excited to be here with you all today and also to be part of the C2C team. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Judy. We're very fortunate to have you on board with us, and we are so excited to see all the wonderful things that you'll be doing. All right, now we're going to take a look at today's agenda. So our first agenda item today will be the presentation and discussion of the P20W dataset, which will be led by Ryan Estrellado, our Director of Data Programs. And after that, we'll invite our data subject matter experts to make any additions, and then we'll open it up for advisory board member discussion. Before we conclude this agenda item, we will take a look at draft rubrics, which will be utilized by the advisory board members to analyze data proposals, which will take place at our fall advisory board meetings. Then we'll open it up for the general public to provide, comments on any items not on the agenda, followed by asking members for any future agenda items, letting the public making requests as well. And then once we've concluded all of our business today, we will adjourn the meeting, ideally on time. So next slide. Now we'll be kicking it off to agenda item 2, presentation and discussion of the P20W data set. And I'd like to invite Ryan to kick us off here. Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, Mary Kate. Hi, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to members of the advisory boards and also to the public. I am going to be facilitating the conversation, question and answer with our subject matter experts. But I also wanted to take some time first, just very briefly, to ground us in how this conversation fits into the process and sort of what we expect from it. And I want to start with a really quick story. It's a story about some work that Dan and I did with our higher ed segments to align common data points and definitions and things. And before our first meeting, I was prepping for it and was reviewing the list of data points that we were going to address in the first meeting to have a conversation about how we can find common definitions. And as I scanned through the list of data points, I saw that one of them that we were going to talk about was part-time enrollment status for higher ed segment. And the first thought that came to me naively was, oh, at least we're doing one of the easy ones today. So everybody's on mute. You should be having a chuckle to yourself at my naivete on the topic. Turns out, of course, as we all know, because y'all are experts at this, that can be a fairly complicated definition, though it seems straightforward on its face. And of course, the higher ed segments did all the hard work to talk through it and to arrive at the best way to define it once it's entered into the P20W data system. The story is important because what I learned from it is that there's a level of nuance that's not always available, even in something like a public data dictionary. And the office is thankful for the chance to learn from our data providers who know their data inside and out. That's something that just happens all the time. Every data point has the potential for that kind of conversation. Today is all about extending that exact same experience to you, the advisory board members, so that you can benefit from the same types of conversations that we get to have with our data providers all the time. So next slide, please, Jane. First, a little bit of grounding and reminders. When I say data points, I'm of course talking about the P20W data points outlined in our participation agreement. There are about 200 data elements when you consider that some data points require multiple data elements. Also, when you consider the 20 that we added related to the teacher training dashboard at the last governing board meeting. And you'll see on the slide is a link to download a list of data points by provider. And I encourage you to do that now, especially for our advisory board members, because as we progress into the question and answer phases conversation, that'll be handy to have. It's 200 data elements. It's a lot, even for folks here at the office who work with this stuff every day. It still is a lot, and we have to rely really heavily on our documentation to make sure that we think about this properly. I have received a few phone calls and emails from advisory board members of the governing board, or members of the public asking about particular data points. And it's not unusual for me to go into a list like this and then find that the data points that folks are interested in are actually there already. Because again, it's a big data set. Sometimes it's not obvious because the field name or the way it's referenced in the participation agreement is different from the way we think about it in everyday life, but very often, it is there. So the idea is collectively for us to grow our familiarity with this so that we can help answer those types of questions for the public. Okay, so as I continue our warm up, again, just friendly reminder and suggestion to download this list. If you can, it'll come in handy in just a few moments. And we can go to the next slide, Jane. Each data point goes through a collaborative process between our office and our data partners that includes, among other things, agreeing on data definitions, formats for data points, selection of data elements that make up a data point, and defining metric calculations. One of the challenges we've learned of working with many individual partners is that there is no natural way to enjoy a sense of collective achievement. That's just because we all work in different offices or for different agencies. So what you see in front of you is a progress board that we use to track the work and build a sense of togetherness as we work on this project. And the result of the last few months worth of collaboration with our partners is a board that is nearly complete. And you'll see that marked by the green little markers here. So thank you so much to our data providers for all of that work, collaboration. It's been a long road, but I hope that y'all are feeling just as rewarded by that work as we are. And the next slide, please, Jane. This is one more update. At our last board meeting, the governing board voted in 20 additional data points related to teacher training. And that was a result of an important process that included ideas from our data partners, recommendations from a task force about research questions, development of a dashboard scope, and the crafting of a new a board-approved procedure for adding data points. And I'm showing this here because I think it's a great example of the process at work. We all built the process together. It's nice to see it happen and see the result. And importantly, the result empowers our office to continue to work on the teacher training or retention dashboard. So big thank you to all our data partners, particularly CSU and CTC for taking the lead on bringing the new data points forward. So thank you. Okay, so that was a lot of information. I don't want to take up too much more time and want to get us into the question and answer soon. So we're going to take a pause here. I'm going to hand the mic back to Mary Kate to get some clarifying questions if there are any from our board advisory board members, and also any comments from our advisory board members.
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, let's jump right into before we open it up to member discussion. I'd like to ask any data providers if they have any thoughts and invite them to just kind of share at this time. So let me scan to see if I'm seeing any hands. And I saw Debbie. So fantastic. Debbie, if you'd like to unmute yourself and share, please.
Hi, thank you so much. Can you hear me okay?
We can, thank you.
Okay, perfect. So I'm Debbie Cochran. I am the Bureau Chief at the Bureau for Private Post-Secondary Education. And I thought it would be helpful maybe before the conversation goes into Q&A or more in depth to just give it a little bit of commentary to kind of contextualize about the Bureau for Private Post-Secondary Education. Obviously, as you all know, we are a mandated data provider for the Cradle-to-Career system, which I am frankly quite thrilled about. And while I know that every data provider has some unique elements to them, I just wanted to share some of what makes us unique, because I think it is relevant to both understanding even some of the information that's already been shared, but also where to go from here. So the Bureau for Private Post-Secondary Education, unlike most other data providers, is a regulatory agency. We approve most private colleges in the state to operate. We monitor those colleges' compliance with the law, and we are required and empowered to discipline those schools if they are in violation with the law, or even revoke their approval to operate. So it's a bit of a different role than say like a system office that helps support colleges, whether reporting to different systems or an association that represents the institution's interests. So in terms of our role as a regulatory agency, we have never previously, up till about less than a year ago, collected student level information. Obviously, Cradle-to-Career is all about aggregating student level information together to be able to extract useful meaning from it for what the actual tangible outcomes are for students and Californians. But this is a new process for us. We are obviously only empowered to do what the law tells us we can do and what our regulations support us in doing. So we now do have laws and regulations in place that require institutions approved to operate by the Bureau for Private Post-Secondary Education to report to us a pretty narrow range of data elements for their graduates specifically. And when we get those data points in place, we will be handing those over to Cradle-to-Career so that those data points can also be part of the system. That's a little bit when you see that progress report slide that I know is a useful way to report out on how the data providers are doing. That's why you see a lot of on holds for us. We're still working through the process. We are internally working through our own systems, our technological systems, our procedures for how to collect that information. And we're just starting to see what we're getting from institutions. And it's a bit messy. I'm going to be honest. Hundreds of the institutions we approve to operate are actually unaccredited. So I know that's not the real image of how we're thinking about the data points that are all coming together. But we do regulate, and in addition to the big schools that people are thinking about, we also regulate, the cosmetology school down the street that enrolls a few students at a time, no accreditation or Title IV funding in sight. So those schools, they don't really necessarily have the data systems in place to facilitate smooth, easy reporting. So we're working with them on that. So just as we think about kind of how our data fits in, and also what is really feasible in terms of data expansion, I wanted to just make sure that that was on the radar. I don't see any reason why that would need to hold back expansion or, conversations about how this system should be structured more broadly, just because we might not be able to catch up. But I did want to make sure that people were aware of how we are trying to fit ourselves in to what is, what is us really playing quite a bit of catch up. So happy to answer any questions, but wanted to put that out at the start.
Yes, very helpful. Thank you so much, Debbie. I appreciate that. I also see Tom's hand is up. So Tom, I'll pass it over to you now.
Yeah, thanks, Mary Kate. And like Debbie, just wanted to clarify and provide some context as to the role of the independent colleges and universities and AICCU in this very important project. AICCU, we represent nonprofit colleges and universities, WASC accredited nonprofit colleges and universities in California. We have about 86 members, but as a whole, I believe there's something like 120 or so nonprofit colleges and universities in the state. I think we're in a similar situation like the schools that Debbie works with, in the sense that, our institutions are very diverse. Our institutions range from very small to very large. And each have their own capabilities as well. And the AICCU, we're an association, we're a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We don't necessarily collect data on behalf of our institutions. So, when things get reported to iPads or whatever, all of that is handled at the institutional level. And I think the same would be for the case for reporting data to the C2C, as well. And that, some type of agreement would have to be signed between each of the 120 or so independent nonprofit colleges and universities and with the data system, which obviously creates a lot of complications and challenges. As I mentioned, each of our institutions, are independent. They have their own governing board. They have their own data system, and a lot of that would have to be cleaned up and sorted. So there are some definite complications as to how that data will be handled between each institution and the data system. We're very excited to be part of this, of course. Originally when the law was written, the first draft of it, AICCU was actually not on the governing board, though our institutions were, were considered data partners. And so they would be providing information to the data system. But you know, we see the importance of this. We see the importance of the independent institutions having a voice on the governing board and having an important role. So we work to include ourselves in the governing board, so our folks can have a greater representation. So we're I believe the nonprofits aren't scheduled to be included in the data system maybe believe next year. I think we're working toward that. We have some ideas as to how we can perhaps, I don't want to say simplify, but make it easier for the data system to access our schools, our member institutions information. So we're working toward that. Still a lot of things to work through, a lot of different legal and privacy concerns as well that need to be worked through. But we're excited to be part of this, and we look forward to sharing our information with this broader tapestry that I think it would be so integral to the state and to our students and our future workforce. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom. I am not seeing any other hands from any other data provider subject matter experts on the line. And still not seeing any. We'll pause that at this time, and I'm going to pass it over to Ryan as he had some thoughts about how we can attack this next part of the process. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary Kate. Okay, so now we're going to move into the question and answer part of our meeting. And to make this time productive, I want to give some guidance on how to use this session. You already know our data points fall under 12 domains, which you see on the slide here. And you'll ask questions. So this is for advisory board members. You'll ask the questions that'll help you understand the data points in our P20W data system or deepen your understanding. And we'll try to go domain by domain just to keep the rhythm of the conversation going. But also it's okay if we jump around from domains, that's fine too. Dan and I will respond, and our data providers will weigh into on the answers. Next slide, please, Jane. And by the way, if you're like me and you need a little bit of structure or inspiration to get a conversation going about stuff like this, here are some sentence frames to get you started. You don't have to use these, of course, but they're here if you want to use them. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's what you see in front of you is a summary of the process. We, of course, today have our subject matter experts from our data partners here to participate in the conversation. And I want to gently suggest not putting them on the spot about what their agency could hypothetically agree to in the future, but instead, let's use our time together to share information so that you can make informed recommendations in the fall. If we do it this way, this will serve two purposes. The first is that it'll help us collectively understand the data set on a deeper level, which will empower us to assist the public in using it. And the second is that you'll go into our fall advisory board meetings where you'll be vetting and prioritizing recommendations with a deeper understanding of the data definitions, particularly in the area that you have been thinking about if you are considering doing a proposal. So you'll see here the way the process works. We're here today doing question and answer and conversations over the summer. If you would like to submit a proposal, you'll be working on that. And then in the fall, we will pick up to 3 of those. So you will pick up to 3 of those to move forward to a feasibility study by the office. And then finally, in the spring, the results of those feasibility studies will be reviewed and discussed. So that's a little just reminder of the way the governance manual lays out the process, where we are in the process, and what you can expect ahead. Okay, so with that, let's start questions and answers or conversations as I'm thinking about it. And we can go to the next slide there, Jane. This is here is a reminder of the domains if you need that to prompt you for questions that you got. We can also switch back to the question prompts, so you have that in the slides if that's useful for you. So I am now going to open it up to the advisory board members. I'm thinking if anybody has a question relating to higher ed segment related data points or work within higher ed segments, so we could start there because I've recently done a lot of work there. And and then we can start there, but we can also jump around if needed. Okay, so I see our first hand. This is from Spada. I'm sorry. Can you tell me if I pronounced that correctly?
Yes, Spade. Thank you very
Great.
much.
Mhm.
So I'll kick us off with some of the post-secondary questions, and I'll start off with, I'm looking at the data elements by provider spreadsheet with the data points. I'm looking at page 4, specifically looking at debt. I see that the segments here that are going to report this would be the California community colleges and the independents and the Bureau for Private, the BPPE. But I don't see CSEC on there. I'm just wondering, that's a really important data point as we look into the student experience, and college debt is a big portion of all those folks that are working in student access and success, getting them to and through. Just wondering why the CSU and the UC are not reporting that, or why CSAC is not reporting that.
Okay, so the question is specifically around the amount, correct?
Amount of debt, correct.
Okay.
I see that for all the data points there, CSAC is reporting on behalf of all the segments, but not on that one particular data point, and I'm just wondering why that is.
Yeah, so let me kick it over to Dan. And Dan, I wonder if maybe where we can start there is just a big picture of how debt and financial aid data points are working across all of the providers.
Yeah, excuse me. So for CSAC, debt was not collected that we could report on. So that is one of the issues there. But as far as the CSAC, we have sorry, I'm pulling it up right now. Their file specification document. What we have is just the received state aid, received aid, and the amount of those, but not the actual debt category.
So if we wanted to, but it's my understanding that the segments do collect that information. Maybe, yeah, I see some of the experts.
I'm happy to provide a little bit of context, and then I see Ed also has his hand raised on this one. For financial aid related data in particular, one of the items that came out of the planning process where we are seeking clarity from the federal government actually is around the permissibility of sharing financial aid data for the purposes of the Cradle-to-Career data system. That was an open question that was still open at the end of the planning process, and it has to do with what's permissible under the Higher Education Act. And so we're currently working with our partners in higher education, including CSU and UC, and with the administration to seek clarity on the permissibility of that. So you zeroed in on a really important question that we've gotten questions about when you look at the financial aid, post-secondary financial aid experiences section on, I think you're right, that's page 4 of that PDF. You notice there are some gaps, and that has to do with the permissibility of data sharing under the Higher Education Act. So the next step for that is for us to continue to seek clarity from the federal government about what's permissible from the Department of Education at the federal level, and are working with our higher education segments on that.
Got it. Thanks for that. And just my second question, and then you can figure out how to do that. Regarding, it's an intersection of the social service experience, specifically asking if the CalFresh status will include post-secondary students as well. It's part of the basic needs initiative on the segments, and I'm just wondering if post-secondary students will be tracked, or we'll be able to know how many post-secondary students are included on CalFresh.
I can answer part of that, then kick it over to Dan. My understanding is because it's matched across all of the data sets, if there is a post-secondary student who's got a record with values in that data, then that would be a part of it. Dan, did I get that right?
That's right.
Spade, thank you so much. Before we leave the topic, Ed Sullivan from CSU is here, and also Ryan Fuller from CSAC is also here. So Ed, let's go to you and get a comment or answer or something to add, then we'll go to Ryan.
Yeah, I lowered my hand because Mary Ann hit it right on the head. Our lawyers were very specific about all financial aid data and the risk that sharing it in violation of HEA would cost CSU students access to federal programs.
Thank you, Ed. Ryan, are you here with us on the panelist board? And if so, do you have anything to add that we might have missed? That's just for Ryan Fuller. Yeah.
Sure. I just wanted to add that, yeah, the debt piece, unfortunately, that's one part that we don't collect. So that's just, it's a piece that we don't have in our data system.
Okay. Thank you, Ryan Fuller. Okay, and thanks again for participating for that question. I'm seeing Nancy with her hand up, and then I see Lauren next. So let's go to Nancy, and then we'll go to Lauren afterwards. Hi, Nancy.
Thank you so much. I think my question is also around the post-secondary financial aid experiences. Some of it sounds like there's been some concern from the CSU and the UC around being able to provide that data. And I understand that's going to have to be sorted out legally with the Higher Education Act. But I am wondering, why would it be that the CCCs would be able to provide that data if the CSU and the UC cannot? And then also wondering specifically around the estimated family contribution, expected family contribution and income level, as well as the financial aid dependency status or eligibility for state aid within the CCCs. I feel like all of those are really important across the three different systems. So my question is both specifically why some of that information wasn't going to be present for the CCC, and what's the difference between the CCC and the CSU and UC response.
I'm waiting to see if we have someone from community colleges on who wants to answer, but I believe part of the difference is that the community colleges, the federal aid going to the community colleges as opposed to the UC and CSU looks quite different.
Could you clarify that a little bit, Marianne, in terms of difference? Because I know that Pell Grants loans go to some of the community colleges. So I'm just wondering the specific differences, and perhaps you don't have the answer, but that feels like something really important for us to understand.
That is it's an important question. So I want to make sure I don't misspeak, and we can get back to you with more details on that. And we'll defer to data providers who are on if they want to add more clarity. So this, again, the crux of this is around the interpretation of the Higher Education Act. And we will be seeking more clarity and more details on that and get back to you.
And perhaps, Ed, could you just provide a little bit more context? I understand the lawyer said that that was a case, but could you just elaborate a little bit more? I know you said that it's going to be concerns that they would lose federal aid, but could you help us understand that a little better?
Higher Ed Act is specific, at least in the guidance that has been out, related to usage of anything that is the fruit of the financial aid or the FAFSA. If you are using any data captured in the FAFSA or the fruit of the FAFSA vine, it can only be used for the administration of aid. Obviously, Cradle-to-Career is not the administration of financial aid. That's where our lawyers were locking in.
Thank you for that, Ed. I also see Todd here from community colleges. At least I saw your hand up for a second there, Todd. I don't know if you're still here.
Yeah, I am. I agree with what Ed said. I think that, as far as the data points that the CCC is able to share, I know that we have listed here the application approval and receiving of financial aid. We do collect information about dependency status and income and budget for students. I'm not sure exactly why the line was drawn where it was. That may be a question that we can bring back to our general counsel. But I think that we do collect that information, but obviously it was there was a decision made there on what we were able to share and what we weren't.
Thanks,
you.
Todd. Might be useful here to say also that with a data set like the one that we're all talking about, like there's quite a bit of complexity there. So preparing for this, we knew that there were going to be some questions that we could answer in a pretty straightforward way, but also expected that some of these we might have to move to a parking lot and have conversation offline, just because we can't fully explore the complexity of it in the time that we have today. So just know that we're keeping a list of those things so that we can either look into it further or continue the conversation. I just wanted to assure you that if we don't get into all the different details to provide a full answer, that it won't be let go. We're keeping track of it, and we'll continue the conversation. Okay, so Lauren was next, and then I also see Jason after Jason Marshall. Hi, Lauren. Oh, you're on mute.
I had two questions. One related to the issue of HEA and Title IV. Have other states included financial aid data in their longitudinal data systems? And then I'll ask my second question, because that's a yes or no. Or do we not know?
Lauren, my understanding is that the lack of clarity is an issue for other states as well, and that there isn't currently uniformity, which is part of what's the challenge.
But some are already drawing on it?
I would need to confirm that. I want to make sure I don't misspeak.
Okay, it just seems it would be helpful to know, and whether it's also about the size of, well, anyway, that was one question. The other, I've learned I need to make sure my questions are public and not in chat, was actually for AICCU, which is about the fact that since virtually all of their institutions participate in Title IV and report to iPads on their students who receive federal financial aid, whether there is any issue in terms of sharing that same data with the C2C, even if it isn't comprehensive for all students.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think ideally our folks will be able to, but as you mentioned, it doesn't encompass all not all students, so that will still need to be captured, and it doesn't encompass all nonprofit WAS accredited nonprofit colleges and universities either. Most of our membership do participate in Title IV. Some, maybe 20 or so are graduate only. So, their students wouldn't necessarily be receiving the Pell Grant. So, that would still need to be captured. And there are very small nonprofits that don't participate in Title IV for any host of reasons. They don't want to be working with the federal government, or, they just don't need to provide their students financial aid because, they receive a lot of grants and support from the community. So they're able to, support their students' education through that mechanism. So, Title IV is great, but, there still needs to be more information that's reported. So, it's working toward that. And, many of our institutions are very small. They have different capabilities, different abilities, and different resources. And then we have the large research institutions like Stanford, USC, Caltech, et cetera, that, do have the staff and support to be able to do this.
But if they're already participating, I'm sorry, but in Title IV, regardless of size, if they are receiving federal student aid for their students, they need to report to IPED. So what I'm sort of asking is, given that they're already compiling and submitting this data to another entity, what obstacle is there? A timing issue about when, or because many of the variables we're looking for are also in those reports. And if they're graduate only, they still have Grad Plus, which is a Title IV program if they're participating in student aid.
Yeah, I think, we'd like to coordinate as much as possible. And, if we're looking toward this time frame of having the expansion of the data system to include, the nonprofits by 2024, we'd like to be able to capture all of them at the same time and, make sure that the infrastructure mechanisms are in place, and we look toward the publics to help us work through those nuances, and then our folks then relying on that to move forward with their own data reporting. And we'd like to be able to rely on iPad's data as well, but again, it's waiting to see the infrastructure fully in place.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Tom. And thank you for the question. We have Jason next. Oh, I'm sorry, Ed. I see Ed has hands up. Let's just go that in case it's on this topic, Ed.
Yeah, and maybe just so we're all clear, I think in the aggregate, in other words, if an AAICU or any other institution were to provide you aggregate statistics, that's possible. The real hook here is record level data related to the FAFSA form. In other words, Ed Sullivan's financial aid FAFSA data plus what he earned, or not earned, but received in financial aid is the concern. And so that's why that's where the rub is here, I think.
Thank you, Ed. Okay, Jason, and then after Jason, Marshall.
Thank you, Ryan. And I'm going to change subjects to K-12.
Okay.
Here. And thank you for the substantial list the team has put together. We really appreciate it from the K-12 side. Just a couple questions. I know when we look at it's a lot, really focus on academics. I'm just seeing here. Is there any focus on bringing in behavior data, suspension data, climate data? Because I know, if you look at early warning systems and the whole child system for the K-12 perspective and adolescents, we need to look at those pieces to really showcase if the schools are providing success programs for those students.
I will attempt to answer that. This is Liberty. I'm from the Department of Education. We provide that at the institution level. That's already it's planned in the participation agreement, which is also publicly available. But I don't see in the data elements, I don't have them all memorized, if we are providing student level behavior or school climate information. So and this is all came out of the planning process and what is seen in the participation agreement. So, yeah.
I didn't see any of those elements there, but I think they're truly important for student success in K-12, and I'm sure others would agree. So it'd be nice to see those additions, specifically, also on the equity side of things, EL status. I saw LPAC scores, but not actually EL status, as well as special education status as well. Would be nice additions. Especially to showcase longitudinally if things are increasing and students are given the services and support needed to be successful.
So the if a student has an LPAC score, they are identified as an English learner. So that by default would be an identifier of a student as an English learner. And child with disability is included as a student characteristic as well. So we do have both of those data elements, I believe that's in there. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yep. So EL status, yes. Disability status, yes. And then as of now, behavior and discipline related stuff, not in the PA.
Not at the student level.
Yeah, not student level, correct. Yeah. Thank you, Liberty, for the clarification. Jason, thank you for the question. Going to go to Marshall next.
Yes, I just want to make sure I got it for clarity. So any financial aid and debt outcome that is linked to Title IV funding, Title IV and Higher Ed Act, we have to get clarification on whether we can use it in Cradle-to-Career. Did I hear that right?
I'm looking at Marianne for that because you addressed the first time, but maybe we need to clarify the question, Marianne.
So I want to make sure I don't misspeak. I think there were two separate questions about financial aid. One was about whether or not data that is ultimately derived from the FAFSA can be shared from, for example, CSU and UC. And that's where we need clarification on the interpretation of the Higher Education Act. Then I think there was a separate question directed at AICCU, which was asking about what data AICCU members can collect. And I think that's the AICCU, as Tom shared at the beginning, questions are slightly different because unlike, say, the UC and CSU system offices, AICCU doesn't collect data from its member institutions already. And so we need another mechanism, whether it's individual data sharing agreements with C2C, or one outcome of the planning process is that we're also exploring the National Student Clearinghouse as an option, which of those mechanisms we use to ultimately get data from the non-public universities. So that's kind of the bigger picture context for that. And then I think that was a subset of that, but I don't want to misspeak on Tom's behalf. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Marshall. Thank you, Marianne, for the clarification. Ed, I see your hand up. If it's on this topic, we can go for it. Go. Oh, hand down. Okay. Marshall, I see your hand up also. Another question or, okay, got it. And now we have Jackie next. Hi, Jackie.
Hi, I'm going to continue on the K through 12. So I had a couple issues that I wanted to talk, or a couple points I wanted to ask about. So with regards to earning the state seal of biliteracy, that's going to be on page 2 down at the bottom. I don't see that we have the state seal of civic engagement. And so I'm just looking at that's coming from the state seal of biliteracy is coming from CDE. I'm wondering if we've considered the state seal of civic engagement as well. And continuing on with CDE data, I'm looking at the bottom where completed high school. As Ryan, you said that, you know, maybe the verbiage that's here may not be inclusive of all the data that's being collected. So I'm not sure if we're looking at GED and HiSET data in that completed high school. Typically they're, you know, it's not seen as that same, but I wanted to get a little more clarification on those two points with regard to CDE data. I do have a couple others, but I'll pause here with these two because those are CDE specific.
So you're correct, the state seal of civic engagement is not included, but we do have those data. I'm not sure at what level. I don't believe that information comes in through CalPAD, so I don't know that it's actually collected at technically the student identifiable level, but I would have to look into that further. And then with regard to high school completion, that's actually one of the things that CDE is working with the Office of Cradle-to-Career on, those nuances that aren't really captured in the data elements that are listed here. And Jackie, you are fully aware of the different ways that a kid technically completes high school and can complete high school. And yes, we do have those data, obviously. And so we are working really closely with Cradle-to-Career Office to explore how to capture what's intended in the data elements listed as, and then with the nuances and ironing it all out. It's a lot of fun.
Fantastic. I think that just knowing with the HiSET and GED having more palatable virtual, bilingual, I think we're going to see increases in that data. So I appreciate that. Additionally, I was wanting to talk about the AP. That's going to be on page 3, advanced placement score and international baccalaureate score. Typically those are referring to the actual scores on a test. I don't see a placeholder for the actual completion of either one of the IB diploma or the AP diploma. Is that inclusive is that line inclusive of those completers, or am I correct and it's just the scores on those specific tests?
I think that's another nuance that we are working through for sure. But as a literal interpretation, I don't think that it does include the completion. It's more assessment information, and I believe that's captured under the assessment category of data.
Fantastic, thank you. And then the last question would be looking at financial aid, and that's going to be on page 4, where it's talking about expected, family contributions. So EFC. Going forward, that's going to be SAI. So I'm just making sure that we're capturing the change in that verbiage and just putting that out there. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Jackie, for the question and for the clarification, and Liberty, thank you for the clarification on that also. Okay, so we are almost at time here. So we're going to let's do Vikash. Jennifer, we'll have you be the last one. Anna, if you could send me, just send me a direct message, we'll make sure that we get your question into the parking lot. And I apologize, I wish we had much more time for this, but we do have one more item we have to get to. So I'm going to turn it over to Vikash. Hi, Vikash.
Thanks. I've also, I guess, in the AP course vein or the test vein, and the looking at some of the ways that the scores are reported on the K-12, like the ACT scores, being dichotomized as a over 18 or under 18. I think with the AP scores, it's the number of threes received, and that's sort of it feels to me like we're losing a lot of information. We just spoke about how we're trying to capture the nuance from the departments and the data. But this seems like a decision made that is going to eliminate a lot of nuance. So I'm just wondering what the process is there and whether that can be kind of backed up a little.
I can quickly comment on that. So all of those data definitions are the result of the conversations and consensus that was built during the planning process. So, there were extensive conversations around the trade-offs exactly that you mentioned. And the way that the data definitions are on our website reflects the consensus that came out of the planning process and what the group understood the best outcome to be for the research questions that were at hand. So that's kind of the status as it is right now. And thank you for seeking that clarification. I think that's what this conversation is for and the process we have.
Thank you, Vikash. Thank you, Marianne. And the last one, we'll go to Jennifer.
Sure. So I definitely want to yes, and what Vikash was saying about the nuances, and I think also as Jackie was saying, I'm just going back to the completed high school. So knowing CalPADS pretty well, I know this is not the place to advocate or like make a recommendation around additional data points. There's a whole process for that. But if you are pulling in the value for how a student's completing high school, should be able to have, and I would advocate for using all of the values within there, including, we have, so especially in the realm of like special education, I know our district in particular does well on the certificate of completion, and we know that there's a new diploma, right, that's going to provide a different level of completion for students with an IEP. So it would be awesome to see that included in the data. And I know that the thing of something new is coming, right? So I know that the data sets you have are, right now maybe certain years, and they're going to, right, how we report this data changes all the time. State seal of civic engagement is not yet, because so many districts, ours included, have just started to even adopt plans to define it and start measuring it. But eventually, certainly will be, and it would be great to, think about how we're planning for the future. Also, so although civic engagement is not currently collected statewide, the one that is missing here that is the state seal of merit diploma. So that would be one that, if it's as easy as the other ones to include, or if we're implying that it's readily available because some of these other things are readily available, that's another one that could be of interest.
Thank you, Jennifer, for that. Okay, so we are at the end of this part of the agenda. I want to take some time to just thank everybody for participating in this. This is the first time that we've done it, and I learned a lot. I hope everybody else did. Of course, this agenda item is ending, but our conversation does not, as usual. This is a big part of what we do. We do look for formal ways to do this in some of our processes, but I think we all know collectively that the conversations are happening all the time. We've collected a bunch of things in the parking lot to follow up on and clarify, and so we'll take our next steps there. Okay, so I am now going to give the virtual mic to Mary Kate, and separate topic from this, but related, we are now going to talk about where we are with the rubric to look at proposals that y'all will be, if you are going to be working on over the summer. Over to you, Mary Kate.
Perfect. Thanks, Ryan. Yes, well put. So what we have in front of you is the rubric and then the proposal form. And so we're going to take a few minutes here. We're going to start with data and tools. As Ryan said, this is the first time that we're undergoing this process. As a reminder, members will submit the proposal forms if they have any recommendations. That's what the form on the right will be. And then members will take a survey to analyze the proposals that have been brought in using the rubric that you see on the left-hand side of the screen. And so I'd like to invite any data and tools members at this time, if you have any feedback for us, any edits, suggestions, anything of that nature that you'd like to see made to either, let's focus on the rubric. That's really the matter at hand here, but if there's any thoughts on the proposal form, we could take that as well. And if you're following along in the public, these materials are also online, and they're called rubric, and it's for agenda item 2. I'm not seeing any hands raised. I don't want to rush the process. Oh, there we go. Amber, please.
I guess I was just curious about, and maybe this is part of the proposal, which I'm not looking at right now, but data quality. Like, what if you looked at it and there was a concern about data quality? I don't see anything on here.
Sure, I'll make that note. So you would think data quality, you might have that as like the 4th criteria point?
Yeah, it seems like that would be important. I don't even see a category where it would belong. But yeah, it seems like that would be important.
One quick reflection on that, because some of the recommendations may be about a specific data point. There may be other recommendations about a dashboard in the future when we have dashboards, or about the data request process. And so we just tried to make the rubric broad enough that it could work across different categories of recommendations. So maybe there's a way to bring your input in and have that fold under the impact and benefit line. In other words, if a recommended additional data point is of such low quality that it wouldn't be useful, that would influence its impact and benefit. So perhaps we could refine the description of that to include that. Might that work? Okay.
Thank you. Great addition. And if this is helpful context as well, all of this has been shaped by our governance manual. And all of that was set forth, and then we're replicating it here in the rubric, if that's helpful context as well. Okay, thank you, Amber. Great idea. Any other folks from data and tools? Hearing and seeing no objections, then I'd like to move to community engagement. Perfect. All right, so same idea, just different advisory board. Community engagement folks, on the right, you have your proposal form. On the left, you have your rubric. If you're following along at home and you're not an advisory board member, again, this is all on our website and can be found there. Any community engagement members that would like to share any thoughts? Okay, hearing and seeing none. We do have, this section took a little bit shorter than we had anticipated. So would we like to circle back to the one remaining question that we had? So Anna, I believe that was you. We can also not take it, but I'd like to offer you the chance to ask that question if you'd like to at this moment. And I also now see Chris's hand is up.
Yeah, just maybe super quick on the data points. Is that okay?
Please.
Okay. Sorry, I had a little note on here. I was looking at the data provider. Oh, let me open my video. And quick question on the career technical education. I see K through 12 has a lot of that in there, but would the community colleges be providing career technical education data points like the strong workforce program that they have, the apprenticeship initiative, any work-based learning? I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything on that front.
I'm looking through the data points for community colleges in the post-secondary experience, and on first scan, I don't see those called out explicitly, but Todd, if you're still here, are any of those values captured in the fields in the participation agreement data points that we've talked about so far? This may also be a parking lot issue that we can explore afterwards.
Yeah, I know that we have, I don't think there are any specifically that are CTE, but I think that the data that we're providing is, we're providing a greater amount of data than just CTE. So, but I think that CTE can be would be able to be filtered in using some of the data points we are providing.
Yeah, so worthwhile to say just generally, not just about community colleges. That's one of the patterns that we see in the way that we're defining data definitions, is sometimes there are questions about that are kind of framed in a like what I think of as like a binary field. Is there CTE, yes or no? Some fields are defined that way in the file spec, but in other cases, there are fields that have a number of different values that the way Todd sort of suggested it can be filtered for those particular things, and then a binary field can be made out of that, or in the report builder or something like that, get the same information, even if there isn't a field that is something like, does this event happen, yes or no? If that event is captured in a larger set of values in a data point, then we can get it that way. So it's kind of about going through the data definitions and seeing if that value exists somewhere else. Just a general statement about some of the different ways these can be defined. Mary Kate, I'm just going to check with you time-wise. Do we have, are we still ahead of schedule? And if so, can we include another question? If not, I'm happy to capture everything that we have. People have been sending me messages, and I can capture that in the parking lot.
Perfect. What I think we should actually do, because we got the one more is let's move to agenda item number 3, which is public comment, see how much public comment we have. And if we have time, we can circle back at the end. Does that work for folks? Brilliant. Okay, so what we're going to be doing now is we're going to be opening it up for public comment. So members on the line that are not our advisory board members, if you're part of the general public, if you would like to make a comment, please feel free to raise your hand using the button at the bottom of your screen. During this time, I will call on you. Just a reminder, you have 2 minutes to submit that comment. I will have a timer running in the background. So if you're over time, I'll just ask you to please wrap up. And then just in case it feels like our members aren't being responsive, this is part of the process. We do promote communication and transparency, but members of the advisory board and staff are not required to respond to public comment. So just want to set the stage and expectations there. Liz, I see that your hand is raised. So we will allow you to unmute yourself.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Great. Good morning, advisory board members, as well as staff on the data system. I can't say enough about how much I appreciate the work that you are all doing. I'm Liz Guillen with Public Advocates, and I'm of Council for Public Advocates. The board members have all received a letter from Public Advocates Education Trust West and Californians together about concerns we have that there are missing data points that would be needed to answer the questions we think are necessary for the completion of the teacher training and retention dashboard. A lot of those questions we got from the overview document that was presented at prior meetings by staff. They include things related to educator demographics, misassignments by setting and course type, and teacher hires from the CBEDS data set. I know that board members have not had time to go through and ask all their questions, so I want to be sure to put this on your radar. We are very concerned that if this groundbreaking dashboard is created, there be an opportunity for policymakers and the public to be able to get a picture, and maybe even this system could create pictures or maps that show where the issues of shortage, vacancies, underpreparedness are the greatest. We know which communities suffer from these deficiencies the most, and there's no excuse for us as a state not to be focusing our policy responses based on this information. So thank you for including consideration of this data. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. I'm seeing another hand raised by Heather. Heather, will be unmuting you if you'd like to.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can. Thank you.
My name's Heather Willoughby. I'm an advocate for students with dependents. I'm really hoping that this dashboard will be able to help us get more data for getting support for parenting students and students with their dependents. I know that I've been told previously that it's not kind of in the project as it is now, but I'm wondering, are we having problems with the hiccup that was happening with the financial aid piece? Or is there another piece that is problematic that is causing a hurdle? Secondarily, I'm also interested in SB 1232 was a Senate bill that was passed that increased the amount of time that you could be supported on CalWORKs while also furthering your education. So previously, the CalWORKs Association helped students in community colleges because there was that limitation of between a 24-month period. So really only people had the ability to attain a certificate or a 2-year AA. And so now that it's been expanded to 60 months via SB 1232, I'm really interested in being able to follow these CalWORK students as they're moving into four-year universities and following that kind of data line too. So I just wanted to, I guess, put those on your radar and find out if there's any way that we could still be trying to figure out parenting students in the data stream.
Okay. Thank you, Heather. Are there any other members of the public that would like to comment? Seeing none, we'll be closing the public comment section. We'll move to agenda item 4.
Mary Kate, I see Jim's hand up.
Did you want to say something?
Yes. I'm sorry. I thought you didn't see my hand. Yes, Jim Switscable, Deputy Director, Chief Information Officer at the Department of Developmental Services. Thank you to the advisory board for your time today, as well as the good work you're doing here with the P20W database. I think it's a wonderful tool, and I want to submit to you for consideration some data elements from the Department of Developmental Services. Department of Developmental Services serve individuals that have been diagnosed with epilepsy, cerebral palsy, intellectual disabilities, and or autism. And I would think consideration for these elements would be very helpful for our analysis, and I would hope others' analysis on how to improve services to this category of individuals. So we really like that consideration. We'll submit the form that you've indicated and hope to be considered in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I missed your hand, Jim. And also, just for clarity purposes, the forms that we just reviewed are actually for our advisory board members. But we have gotten your public comment here today and appreciate it. Perfect. Okay, so if we can move on to agenda item 4, which is future agenda items. So I'd like to open it up to our advisory board members first, then we'll open it back up for public comment. But do any of our advisory board members have any future agenda items that they would like to see at future advisory board meetings? Jackie, I see your hand.
I would appreciate maybe some clarifying information, and I apologize if others know this, about the student level data identifiers. You know, I know that oftentimes we're using SSIDs, but that's in public, and we're using CBEDs for the institutional code, but that's in only for public. If there is any way we're capturing private, schools and private students information, that I'm not aware of that, so my apologies. So a future agenda item on just the student level data and institutional level clarification, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you. Are there any other members that would like to ask for any other additions?
I'm sorry, I have a question. I really enjoyed our time together with both the advisory board members. Are there plans on having another joint meeting? So I feel like there was a lot of good cross-pollination here and would like to see that. Is that something that we could agendize in the future, or is there already plans for that for next year's meeting calendar?
Yes, thank you. That's a wonderful recommendation. I think it's definitely something that we can, if this proved to be a fruitful model, something that we can look into for future meetings.
So if, just to follow up on that, I think as we go through the process of looking at the proposals that both advisory board members will submit, I think it makes sense to have another joint meeting so we could see all of those together and have a joint discussion about what that would look like, as the two advisory board members, and maybe even, anyway, so just having that conversation with both boards.
Yeah. Mary Kate, I'm happy to speak to that a bit. Really appreciate this input. At this time, we've already scheduled 2 separate meetings for September and October for the 2 boards in this first round. Part of what I'm also thinking about at the moment is the different scope of recommendations. So the Data and Tools Advisory Board's scope is different from the Community Engagement Advisory Board scope. So when we were mapping out this process for the first time in the hypothetical, we had imagined that it would make the most sense for those to be tackled separately because the scope is different and to have a manageable number of things to discuss in each meeting. That being said, we're always open to ideas. And so perhaps I'm just going to think on the fly for the moment. I'd recommend sticking with the dates that we've already publicly announced for this year. But we and you and everyone should keep this thought in mind, because then we can think about for the next cycle whether there are any changes we want to make to ensure that this cross-pollination of ideas can occur. The final thing I'll mention is anyone, you can attend each other's meetings. You would just be a member of the public in doing so, and would be able to speak during public comment. But part of what we're trying to do here is provide enough clarity about, like, here are the kinds of recommendations that are in scope for the Data and Tools Board. Here's what's in scope for the Community Engagement Board based on the governance manual and the responsibilities outlined in statute.
Well put. Thank you, Marianne. I see Jason's hand next.
Yeah.
And sorry, to circle back, Spada, you're good? All right, go for it, Jason. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Kate. Just a suggestion, just to add to that, is maybe a standing agenda item with a report out from either liaison from one of those committees at the other, the Tools and Advisory Committee can report out at the communication one and vice versa. Maybe a standing agenda item that gives a quick little report and overview of what was discussed and some action items taken. Might be helpful.
I have that noted here. Thank you. And Jake, saw your hand next.
Thanks so much. And this kind of goes with the scope of what the Data and Tools Advisory Board has. And I know that it's been a really helpful process today to go through data points before decisions were made, final decisions were made. I think the same might be said about the data request process. While it's something that we can, that it is kind of in our scope to change, to the extent that we could be involved or that the board could be involved in some way in its creation, could be really helpful. Thanks.
Thank you. And I see Chris.
Hi, good morning. One is just a clarification. The teacher dashboard, could you all remind us the timeline for that, like development, release, etc.? And then my other question, or I guess a recommendation for a future agenda item, I think it might be helpful and actually useful to the C2C staff to agendize. Like, you all get lots of requests for variables and data points. I think it might be helpful to share, I don't know, your top 10 hits list of variables that you are getting requests for that aren't possible, and to share that reasoning so that maybe you stop getting those requests, or we can, like, so folks know what that is and know that you all have heard it and seen it, and that they know the reason why it's not possible now. But maybe you can all work to it in the future. Does that make sense? Just to let folks know, like, we hear you, but it's not possible for X, Y, and Z reason, could be a useful opportunity, just to let folks know they're being heard.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you.
And the timeline for that dashboard, or is there one?
I'm happy to speak to that, and Ryan, please jump in if you would like to with more specifics. So the timeline for the data system overall that we've most recently shared is that we hope to have our data infrastructure and the review of our security protocols in place to be able to receive data from our data providers by early fall. That timeline has been delayed from what we originally had hoped for, in large part because the technical build of the data system took longer on the C2C side than we expected. So just want to be very transparent about that. In parallel, as the progress board showed that Ryan shared earlier, our data providers have been engaging with us with plans to get their data files ready so that we'll all be ready to go once we have that on board. So with that, the initial plan for data sharing would be this fall, and then we can use that P20W data and the new data points from CTC and CSU to start doing the analysis this fall. The most ambitious timeline would be for us to then be able to have a beta version of the dashboard to start getting feedback on by next spring. And then, as was discussed in the last governing board meeting, we're still in ongoing conversations with CDE on some of the data points that were discussed and would be needed on the teacher side for that. So there are a number of contingencies that all need to fall into place for the release of that first dashboard, and they're linked not only with the questions of all the user-centered design and scope and planning for the dashboard itself, but also the actual build of the data system and the data transfer and identity resolution and initial analysis of that. Thank you for the question.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, seeing no other hands from members, I'd like to open it up to members of the public. So members of the public, if you have any suggestions for items that you would like to see on our advisory board meetings, please raise your hand now. I would like to make the ask, as Marianne has kindly pointed out, we have two separate advisory boards. We have data and tools and we have community engagement. And so your request might not fit for both of those, right? So please be specific about whether you'd like it to be for data and tools or community engagement. I am seeing one hand. As a reminder, your comment period is limited to 2 minutes. Liz, if you'd like to begin your comment.
Yes, thank you. Liz Guillen of Council with Public Advocates. Once again, I just want to underscore some of the recommendations that board members have made around both joint meetings, but also specifically Chris Nellum's suggestion. We know there's a lot of teacher data out there. There's some new teacher data. Like you, we want to get this right, but we don't want to, overcomplicate or duplicate when not necessary. So it really would be helpful to have a conversation before finalizing the teacher dashboard data set. What is and what isn't there and why? Particularly because we know that there's a lot of new teacher data that have been made available. So we appreciate your hard work in sorting this out, and I hope that you will consider making that a public discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Raquel, I see your hand up. If you'd like to begin, Raquel.
Hi, can you hear me?
And thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Raquel Morales from the Education Trust West. And I just want to voice and second what Liz Guillen from Public Advocates just said. We look forward to working with you all as the beta version of the dashboard is being released and also being finalized, and working in collaboration with both all of the advisory board members and C2C staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands up, and we are at time. We're a minute over. So what I'd like to do at this time is adjourn the meeting. Just some quick concluding thoughts. Thank you all so much for joining us at today's meeting. And if we could advance the slide when we have a moment. The Cradle-to-Career office appreciates your time, input, and attention to these important matters. As a reminder for members, our next data and tools advisory board meeting will be in Sacramento. We'll be in person, but we will still have this virtual room for folks that want to join us from the public. And that will happen on October 12th. And for our community engagement advisory board folks, we will see you in Sacramento on September 12th. So thank you so much, everybody. We'll conclude today's session, and we will see you soon. For anybody that had parking lot items, we'll go back to those and we'll be in touch. Okay. Thank you.